right. So Jeff and I are here with our good friend Andy Boysen Jr., well-known composer, known for many pieces. Andy, I sketched down some of them. Probably I will miss some. Am I correct that some of your more popular pieces are I Am, Conversations with the Night, Song for Lindsay, Kirkpatrick Fanfare? Is that kind of...
That's hitting them, yeah.
Wow, I did my homework.
Those are the big ones. Tricycle.
Yeah.
I mean, the ones that played the most. Yeah.
So can we talk about Tim Miles for a second? So again, Tim Miles always asks, why is Tricycle not in 3/4, but it's in 5/4? So can you give us the quick Tricycle reasoning for that?
Which is a very fair point, right? Why did I put it? Okay, so it's one of those where I wrote the piece first, and then I had to come up with a title afterward. So the piece was in 5. It was what it was musically. But the idea of the piece is about these 3 middle schools that had never been in a district together before, and they kind of like redrew the district lines. And so these schools were all together now for the first time. So they did a bunch of activities like around their new district, like, sports things and art things and this and that. And so the music one was they put all 3 of the bands together, did this big thing, and I wrote a piece. So the idea of the piece is like, here's one theme, here's another theme, one for each school. And then at the end, they all come together and work together. And then I was like, well, I don't know what to call this thing. But it's kind of light and fun and happy. And I don't want to say naive, but, it's just simple in some ways. And so I was like, well, what's light and fun and has 3 things that are all kind of working together? Mm-hmm. Well, 3 wheels of a tricycle. There you go. And then, there you go. And then, and I didn't think about it at the time. And then I literally almost every time I do it, you ask a kid for questions, and the first question, why is it in 5?
Yeah.
Well, you got 3 wheels and 2 pedals, so there's 5.
That's my new answer. That will be my new answer to that question. Thank you, Jeff.
And that's in C major, right? C major.
Yeah.
And I always that's listed as a 3. Am I correct? 2.5, 3.
Yeah, it's listed as a 3.
I always feel like it's a little harder than it seems.
It maybe. The ranges are super playable, like super playable. And so the challenge is the rhythmic challenge. And so I guess I've always felt in my mind, like I can teach a rhythm, Mm-hmm. You can't make a kid play a 5th higher than they can play yet. Mm-hmm. So especially since there's a bunch of them that repeat. So you could, here's the 5 main rhythms and we'll all learn them together. And now we all got it,
Yeah.
But yeah, it has some little tricky moments. But I did have a friend of mine who was one of the band directors at one of these schools, and he was like, "This is not a middle school piece. Blah blah blah. Nobody will ever play with this with their middle school band. What were you thinking?" Like, he kind of scolded me for it at the time. And actually, it gets played by middle schools everywhere. So
yeah. So what are some things? So we're going to do this short segment on some pieces that are playable by middle school. I wrote down some notes of things that are cool about your music and why I enjoy playing your music. So I'm going to list some off. Let's see how this goes. Let's see. First of all, the horn parts are usually great, right? Because you're a French horn player in a past life. So I like how you tend to take the marimba and have that keep the beat. It almost serves as a function of a snare drum, sort of. That happens a lot. I like how the percussionists are asked to play multiple instruments. In fact, the going between pieces, you can tell you actually plan that. How do you do that? Like, do you go into the UNH percussion studio and set everything up, or do you just kind of wing it?
You mean can you make it from this to that in time, sort of thing?
Right.
Yeah. No, I don't actually do it at the studio, but I'll sit at home and kind of imagine, okay, I got sticks, I'm playing here, time to put them down, grab this, okay, I can do that. Yep. So I kind of literally do the movements. So if it's moving from timpani to marimba, I'll walk across the living room and try to imagine how that would feel to put down some notes, grab others, be ready for the next thing.
Yep. And then
pretty hard.
I also wrote that you always seem to have at least one motor impulse piece, section of the piece that kind of is easy for the kids to really grasp onto. It's not necessarily the entire piece, but it's a portion of it.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a conscious choice. I think that's probably just I gravitate toward that sort of thing. So hopefully that's not a bad thing.
No, I think it's great. All right, so let's get into. I think we have three. First of all these things are on your website, andrewboysenjr.com. People can check stuff out there as well, and I'm sure they can even contact you through that site. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to be totally honest. I don't know any of these pieces. So can you walk us through? So the three pieces that are here that are in the grade 2, one is called Apples.
Yeah. Okay. So a few years ago, I did a piece for an honor band out in Minnesota, and I had this idea that like we needed more minimalist music for a school band. So I wrote this piece called "Snowflakes Dancing," which I know you've done.
Yep.
And I had a lot. It was a different way of thinking about writing a piece, so I liked that challenge, and had a commission for the retirement of a friend of mine. He was still is an avid runner. So I just started, well, that might be a nice possibility to kind of do a minimalist thing. Cause like long distance running, there is that kind of like sameness, but things are always changing slightly.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of echoing that idea and thinking about maybe I can do a kind of a younger band minimalist piece. So it does kind of some of the same, it doesn't do the same processes that Snowflakes Dancing does, but it's a process piece. It was like I literally planned everything out and like, okay, it's going to be, how did this all work? So he was 15 years at 2 different schools. So everything's 3 and 5. It's like, it's in 3/4 with 5 bar phrases. So it's all 15 counts per phrase of the tune. The main melodic idea is like this third that expands out to a fifth, so that intervallically a third to a fifth, so 3 and 5 there. So there was all this stuff, and then I laid it out in 5 sections, and they're going to overlay this way, and so all this stuff was kind of planned in advance. So it's kind of, I think, a different sort of piece in that way, because there's a lot of things you can talk about relative to other minimalist music or process music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fun. It's fast, and again, some rhythmic challenges, but it kind of loops back over the same rhythmic ideas.
There's a piece I haven't written down, and it's just in my head right now as you're talking, and I don't remember the name of it, but it's all about like you're getting out of school for the summer.
Yeah.
Like what piece is that?
That's called Bright Sunny Days.
Right, and is that a grade 3?
That's a 3. Yeah.
All right. I jumped to that. I'm sorry, but
No, that's great. I kind of hadn't thought about that piece in a while.
Bright Sunny Days. People should check that out. Okay, let's go back to grade 2. What about Music Lover?
Okay, so Music Lover and Tiny Dancer. Are these the 2 you wanted to, or was there a different one you were going to bring up?
Nope, that's good.
Okay. Yeah, so they go as a pair, actually. I mean, they could even be performed as a pair. One is a little harder than the other. Tiny Dancer is definitely like an edge harder than Music Lover. But this is another thing where like, so a bunch of years ago, I started doing some projects with my friend Eric Evanson, where we started doing these like artwork with music. And you know, when I was a kid, I was like, when I was in high school, I wanted nothing more than to be John Williams. You know, I wanted to be the next film composer. So, you know, that's always kind of in the back of my mind. And so I thought, well, what if I do like find a silent film, you know, that's public domain. And so I did this score to The Great Train Robbery. And this is a kind of an upper high school level, like a solid grade 5, well, hard grade 4, easy grade 5. And I had a lot of fun doing it, because it was like, it really was, here's the finished film. This music needs to take 32 seconds, and this music needs to take 14 seconds. And, you know, so it was a cool challenge for me compositionally, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So then I got this opportunity to do these middle school pieces for an honor band at Ohio State. And I thought, because one of them was like the 6th grade honor band, and the other was the 7th grade honor band or something like that. So slightly different levels, but both middle school level pieces. And I just started searching. I found this filmmaker from the early 20th century, Georges Méliès. I think I'm saying that right, Melies. So French filmmaker, and he's like it's like these are movies from like 1905, and he's experimenting with all this trick photography stuff, where, you know, like they'll cut it, and like all of a sudden, you know, the guy's now holding a rabbit or whatever, you know, like because they would cut the film and splice it, and he was working on like putting images from one one take on top of another, and like all sorts of really crazy stuff for like 120 years ago. And these are just like, they're kind of corny little films. They're kind of strange little films, but they're funny. They make me laugh, and they make me happy. And so the music is just this kind of light, fun stuff. The Music Lover one, he's like magically kind of bringing this tune to life, and by the time you get to the end of the tune, he's put it up on a staff behind him, and so I used that melody as the melody for the piece and kind of broke it apart that way. I tried to add some other things in there, some things where like some of the clarinet lines, you'll be down on the low G and you'll pop up to the D, so it's like an opportunity to work on crossing the break and things like that. So some educational like pedagogical things even within some of this other stuff that's maybe hopefully presented really musically. And they're both short, like 2.5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tiny Dancer and Music Lover, those are both like public domain videos that people can find and use.
Yeah. And then, there's obviously the one on my website. So I will say this, if anybody ever does them, there are different versions out there which are substantially different lengths. So best to make sure you're doing the right one so that you can line it up. Otherwise, the tempos won't work out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then I think I've written down 1, 2, 3 pieces that are in the grade 3 level, and I know one of them is like a really good Texas middle school band's going to play it. But I thought these would be worth talking about because they're great pieces of music, and I think for me, I've done these at the high school level, but I think that they're still kind of, if somebody has a really good middle school program, that they can start with these. Let's start talking. I don't know, what do we want to talk about first? How about Snapshots of Acadia? This is a newer piece. For people who are not from Maine or New England, Acadia National Park is a wonderful national park that we have and up in Bar Harbor. And why don't you tell us the story behind it?
Yeah, what a beautiful park too. It's just so far, most of the national parks are all out west, and kind of cool that we have one up in our part of the country. So my friend John Morneau, who taught in the Maine public schools for a really long time, but he's also the director of bands at Bowdoin College, and conducts one of the bands. I think he's still doing the University of Southern Maine music camps.
Yeah, he is.
And he's every few years he'll commission a piece for the group at the summer camp. So he asked me to do a piece for them, which was really cool. It was fun to do that. And we talked about things that might be Maine related, since the camp was for the University of Southern Maine music camps. And he and his son had just, or I don't think it was earlier that year, maybe, gone up and hiked in Acadia, and they had a bunch of photos. And so I just went through the photos, and I found a few that I just thought were stunning, because there were several. And the idea is that you would hopefully project those photos with each of the 4 movements of the piece. So it's kind of a big piece in some ways for a younger band to tackle. It's one of those, I think a lot of the technical stuff falls pretty nicely in middle school, but just as a whole, it can be a lot. I think there's a lot of musical things and a lot of exposed things that would maybe a high school might do. Might have a good time with it too. I think you did it with one of your groups.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And all the, all the musical material is Acadia. I just took that ACADIA. I took the I, and you say E when you say it, Acadia. So it's ACADA. There's all the melodic and harmonic and all that kind of stuff material for the movements. And so I kind of use that as the basis of the piece.
And you have that listed on the website too in the program notes, so people can see that if they're reading about it too.
Yeah, I forgot it.
Yeah,
thank you. I forgot I did that. And I think I had that listed as a 2 for a while because that was the intention. But actually, it was you and I talking after you were. And I was like, oh, he's right. So now it is a 3 in my.
But a lot of it is a 2. It's like, a couple players maybe are like upper clarinets. I think near the 4th movement, that's a harder spot, but a lot of it is really not very hard. It stays in the staff for trumpets, So the four movements are Bass Harbor Headlight. I love the chime part on that. That's really cool. Thunder Hole, so all the waves crashing with the percussion. That's hard. Like
that's an example of one of the ones that I didn't realize that it was harder than it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. At that tempo, and to make, it's supposed to have the percussions simulating the waves crashing at this place where the rocks meet. And I like the shape of it and the idea of it, but it's maybe a little harder to put, like it's whole notes and half notes and that kind of thing.
Right.
But it's just a little harder to put together than it would seem at first.
Mm-hmm. And then Calm Water with at the base of Cadillac Mountain or whatever it is, and Sunset at Acadia, which is just gorgeous. Yeah, it's a great piece of music. You know, I did it with our high school group, as you just said, and like the kids really enjoyed it. And some of those kids were in the camp band who had premiered it with John, and they were actually the ones who asked me, "Hey, we should do this." So it's, okay, I'll look into it, and we did it. So
that's cool. Yeah, well, that's good to hear that they liked it.
And it's also cultural. It's cultural. Like people, especially if you're not from Maine, this is a faraway place. So if you're in Tennessee and you want to do a middle school band piece, like Maine is a different culture, right? I'm actually doing it in New Hampshire next month at an honor band.
Oh, you are?
Middle school honor band. So nice. I'll tell them you said hi.
You'll have to let me know how it goes.
Yep. All right, two more pieces. Metamorphosis. I just did this, and this was commissioned by Eric Cobb, who is a middle school band teacher. So tell us a little bit about Metamorphosis.
Yeah, that was a cool project. I mean, Eric's one of our grads from right before I came to UNH, but he's like the executive director of the State Educator Association. I mean, he's just a fantastic teacher, and his students love him, and he just does great work. So he asked me to write a piece, and he doesn't live very far away. So the cool thing is I was able to like go down and meet with the kids, and he had them all contribute ideas for what the piece could be. Like the whole band had to. I don't even remember. He might have made them write like a short paper about what it could be. But in the end, we came up with this huge list of here's ideas, and then the kids all voted, and it got down to 2 ideas that were very different. And one of the ideas had to do with the Challenger disaster, because of course Kristen McAuliffe, who's the teacher on that shuttle, was a New Hampshire teacher. So there was a New Hampshire connection there. And I figured the dramatic nature of that would be what they would choose. But they actually all voted pretty overwhelmingly for the life cycle of a butterfly, which is unexpected. And I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do with this? So what I did is I tried to do a metamorphosis. Essentially, I wrote a caterpillar theme, I wrote a butterfly theme, and then I backtracked. This is not the way I normally work, but I backtracked and like, how can I turn that first one into the second one? So there is a section once the tempo speeds up that like you keep hearing the same material cycle over and over, and it changes, and then it changes a little more, changes a little more, changes a little more, changes a little more, and then all of a sudden the new theme comes out. It's maybe the caterpillar theme is maybe a little too pretty for an actual caterpillar. I don't know. It's kind of a sweet little slow theme, but that was the idea, and I liked the idea honestly of just the metamorphosis in all of us and all of our lives and how we grow and change and that sort of thing, which seemed particularly important for kind of that middle school age, but I mean really true for all of us. So I kind of liked to take a step back and think about it beyond just the life cycle of a butterfly.
And I like how you have the band sing on F, thankfully, and thankfully you say any octave. Man, if it was like everybody sing this exact pitch, like that's so much harder than sing whatever octave you want. So,
and I've done that before, and I just had an experience with a band where they were really struggling to all sing in unison. It's a big ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then and that's a really good piece. I've done it twice now to do when you have a strong flute player, because it goes down to low C, right?
Yeah.
Flute solo.
It finishes up high and soft. It's not an easy solo. The solo is the only thing that's like that's the hardest thing in the piece.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and if you can play 47 to 65, then you can play the piece.
Right.
That's the panic moment for me.
Yeah.
Before we get to
better than I do.
before we get to the last one, Jeff, you're having Andy come in and work with your Stratford Wind Symphony next week, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, he is. Yeah, he's going to be doing Kirkpatrick Fanfare, and then All the Pretty Little Horses.
Oh, that's
and
a great
then,
piece.
Old Ben's Farm. And I got to tell you, last night when we were rehearsing Old Ben's Farm, they had tons of questions. They said, well, how's this a cryptograph? And I said, I'll let him explain it next week.
All right, I will have to go review my notes on that before.
Because here you've got folks that are, they're truly rocket scientists working in the engineering field, and lots of music educators and former military band people. So I figured I could sort of do it, but it would be better to come from the composer's mouth than my mouth.
Yeah. No,
but that in itself, Old Ben's Farm, is a really accessible piece for like an 8th grade band, because even if you look at the clarinet licks, when you go from the low E and you go all the way up to the D and everything, totally accessible. The D is going to be a stretch, but for the most part, the only thing that's really the stretch there is getting them up to the tempo you want them to be at. But from a learning standpoint, Old Ben's Farm is really a good learning piece for like an advanced 8th grade band or an 8th grade honors band.
Cool.
And Pretty Little Horses, it gets middle school kids to sing. The big thing there, once again, is the flute part. And
you need a great flute player.
Kirkpatrick's a bit of a stretch. You got that one. They'd have to push themselves a little bit for it.
All the Little Pretty Horses. Do you remember what my wife Crystal said when she heard the piece first? She's like, it sounds like Andy Boysen and Lord of the Rings put together.
Oh, she never told me that.
Yeah, some of the harmonies that you use, she really thinks.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it's a great piece, and the singing at the end is awesome. That's a little bit more advanced to me. I think that's a grade 4, right? It's a strong 4, but
the piece as a whole for sure is.
You mean the 3 movements? Yeah.
Yeah.
3 movements, but by itself, I think a good 8th grade band could handle it.
Yeah, but you need a really good French horn section. They go up to high G and they're not with the altos.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think it comes down to the whole thing. What middle school, each state, like a Texas middle school, is a little bit different level than a Connecticut middle school or a New York State middle school or a Massachusetts New York middle school, etc. So I think you got to just judge it based on what your typified middle school program is.
I'll run it by my wife, and she'll say that you're crazy.
Well, I have 4 middle school band directors who just did it in Connecticut, so they had nice performances.
All right.
Well, nice to hear it's getting played no matter what. So.
Yeah, it is.
Last piece we're going to get to, I think, is pretty unique, and that's called Unraveling. And what I think is cool about Unraveling, for people who are going to do it, put your best percussionist on the snare drum, period.
Gosh.
Right? Okay. Because the entire piece is supposed to accelerando from beat 1 to all the way through the end.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that, the connection between Ravel and Unraveling and Bolero and all the things.
Yeah. And you are so right. And that's another thing. Like, again, when I wrote it, didn't know that would be you really need a killer. If you're going to do it with a middle school band, you need a killer snare player.
Yep.
They need to be the best kid in your band kind of thing. But if you got that, it's a lot of it's really playable. So this was actually, the guy that I wrote Apples for his retirement, his name was Randy Atkinson. Randy was the chair of the Iowa All-State, the middle school All-State band. I think it's maybe just be 8th grade, or maybe it's 7th and 8th grade. I don't know. But they do it every year at their bandmasters convention. So he had me come in and guest conduct and write a piece for it, because they commission a piece every year, which is really cool. So it was written for middle schoolers, and the way the commission works there, or the honor band works there, is I think you start at rehearsal at 9 a.m. and then you finish at 12, and the concert's at 1. And then you do it again at like 2:30 or something, or 2 o'clock. So like you have 3 hours to put a program together. And I was like, oh, man, this is going to be, they're going to be really good kids. These are the best middle school kids in Iowa. But that's not a lot of time.
Yep.
So what I ended up thinking was, well, what if I write a really cool melody, and it can be hard, but then I just repeat it over and over and over again.
Right.
And literally every time I do this piece, the first thing I do is we all just like, okay, you guys start at 9, you guys start at 17, you guys start at 20. And everybody plays the tune together. And we play it slowly, kind of figure out how to play an octatonic scale because that's the material for the piece. And then I just keep speeding it up until really everybody can play it pretty much as fast as we'll need to go. But by then, you've really already accomplished 65% of what makes that piece hard, 70% of what makes that piece hard. And so then it's just like getting the color in there. So, okay, so then the idea was, okay, I'm going to have this piece that just keeps repeating the theme and gets louder. And what's another piece like that?
Yeah.
Well, I just started, and of course, the classic is Bolero. So Bolero then became a definite influence on the piece. The snare thing at the beginning. And I decided to kind of like speed it up as it went too, so that the piece kind of spins out of control was my idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then my little goofy title again, Unraveling, or if you cross out the un and the ing, it's revel, unraveling. So it's me unraveling here. So again, it was, I think a cool opportunity to maybe like expose some students to some other great music. And
a couple other things I like about it is that it's contemporary. There's some half step stuff in there. And that's hard to find, at this grade level. And then I like that the brass have to do mouthpieces and that they're singing. I think those are all cool elements to that piece.
I got to use the mouthpiece thing more often. I really like that color.
Because it forces us to use the mouthpiece more. It just does. Especially if you can hear the melody or whatever part they have to buzz somewhere else in the piece or in the ensemble. That way it helps them match it.
Well, it's definitely good pedagogically, but it's a cool color. It's something you don't expect to hear from a band. So, yeah.
Well, I think we covered what we need to cover. Jeff, you got any final words?
No. Thank you. Thank you for all you do and all you add to the repertoire.
Oh, thanks.
Andy,
See you guys.
are there any other pieces that you have in the works that are for young band? No.
Oh, well, yeah, actually. So there's a piece called Ad Lib that I just wrote for Tim McDonald down at Bellingham, Mass. And there's a lot of improv elements in that. There's a whole section in the middle. It's a little 12-bar blues thing, and you can solo over that. But there's also some solo stuff that's like, hey, you've got these pitches, solo in the style of the music we've been playing. There's some percussion improv stuff in it. So there's all sorts of things like that built into the piece. That's cool. So, yeah, it was written he had a percussionist in his band pass away unexpectedly. So that's going to premiere in June. So yeah, looking forward to looking at that.
So that will be available at some point and recording available.
Yeah.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.